Number 10, Notre Dame. So it's year 3 for Marcus Freeman, and I think people are starting to get a little bit restless. Now, I'm not saying that he's on the hot seat, but you have to make the playoff this year with 12 teams. There's zero excuse not to. You got Duke transfer Riley Leonard at quarterback. That feels like an upgrade, and they also feel like they've upgraded at receiver as well. Defensively, they should be pretty good. All-American safety Xavier Watts, future first-round corner Benjamin Morrison. Now, Notre Dame cannot earn a first-round bye under this new 12-team format because they will not be playing for a conference championship. If you look at their schedule, they open with Texas A&M. They also got Louisville in there, Florida State in there, USC. So they play some quality opponents, but there's no Ohio State. There isn't a game that they can't win, and they should be making the playoffs. Number 9, Missouri. What a great season it was last year for the Tigers. They won 11 games. They beat Ohio State. You get your starting quarterback back, Brady Cook, and your top wide receiver back, Luthen Burden III. They also picked up 15 transfers in the portal, but we are at a crossroads with the Missouri football program under Eli Drinkwitz. They're 1-7 against top 10 teams under Eli. Now, this could be a turning point for the program where they start winning more of these games. Maybe that Ohio State win is kind of a slingshot. Now, albeit Ohio State, that was a depleted Ohio State team, but still, Missouri gets credit for that win. They have a pretty favorable schedule at the start until they play Texas A&M in early October. They also play at Alabama, and they get Oklahoma at home. And I think out of those 3 games, you want to see them win 2 out of those 3. Number 8, Penn State. Penn State should be making the 12-team playoff nearly every year. They're clearly a tier below Ohio State and Michigan. And there are some questions in the Penn State football program, like, is James Franklin just not the guy that can get you over the top in big games? Do you just have poor coordinators? And then what about Drew Aller? Is he just limited as a quarterback, or is he limited, but that's because of bad coaching? So they have new offensive and defensive coordinators, and that's going to help answer some of these questions. I still think that running back duo of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen is going to be pretty good. They were a little bit more quiet last year than I had thought, but still a very talented running back room. Wide receiver will be interesting. It hasn't really been that good in the past, but they added the Ohio State transfer Julian Fleming. But can he remain healthy? That's a big question mark for him. Abdul Carter switched to defensive end this offseason. I think that's a good move. And they added Georgia corner A.J. Harris through the portal, so they're trying to make some moves. They don't play Michigan, but they do play Ohio State at home. And honestly, I like this schedule for Penn State. They open with West Virginia, then they have a stretch of 4 games later on in the year where they play at USC, at Wisconsin, home versus Ohio State, and home versus Washington. But outside of that stretch, I mean, this is a very manageable schedule, and there's no reason why they can't make the 12-team playoff. Number 7, Ole Miss. There's always excitement surrounding Ole Miss, but maybe no more than this year. They're coming off an 11-2 season, including a Peach Bowl win over Penn State. Their quarterback Jackson Dart is back, and they rebuilt the offensive line through the transfer portal, but here's the big thing with Ole Miss. They should be a playoff team for sure, but past that, it's kind of hard to say how good they'll actually be. Since Lane Kiffin took over, they're 34-15 overall, which is the 9th best record among Power 5 schools since 2020. That includes going 7-8 against top 25 teams. So against a ranked opponent, they're kind of a toss-up. I think you're looking at a 10-2, maybe an 11-1 regular season. Their 3 tests seem to be LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. But just know they may start off really hot. Their first 4 weeks of their schedule is kind of a cakewalk. Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Wake Forest, and Georgia Southern. So on paper, they'll be rolling through teams, and they may start off something like 7-0, but their best win up until that point will be against LSU. I just can't quite buy it yet that they're going to be better than these next top 6 teams. Number 6, Michigan. So they lost a ton of production on offense. J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, pieces of that offensive line, no more Jim Harbaugh. There's a lot gone. The good news is Donovan Edwards is more than capable of being a big-time back. You just want to see him be a little bit more consistent from a week-to-week basis. That seems to be the general theme coming out of Ann Arbor. But the good thing is, under Sharon Moore, their identity is going to remain the same. They'll have a good offensive line. They'll run the ball, control the line of scrimmage. Don't forget about tight end Colston Loveland. He's going to be a major part of that passing game, and he's probably on his way to becoming a first-round NFL draft pick. Now, the true power of this Michigan team will be their defense, because they got Will Johnson, the best corner of the country, paired with a really good defensive line. But really quickly on Will Johnson, because it's very impressive, he was targeted 38 times last year, allowing 17 receptions for only 267 yards. He had 4 picks, 0 touchdowns allowed. That D-line is going to be nasty. That trio of Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Derek Moore, probably the most disruptive group of defensive tackles in the country. And talk about more NFL guys, you're going to see it on that defensive line. Number 5, Alabama. I think Alabama is going to be just fine. Jalen Milroe has improved so much as a passer, and he also has that mobile threat, which makes him very dangerous. He leads all returning Power 4 QBs with a 172.7 passer rating from last season. Now, they lost a lot in the transfer portal, understandably so. They lost 10 defensive backs who transferred out, but they brought 5 back in through the portal, and they actually had a net gain in starting experience. The group that transferred out had 17 combined starts. Most of that was Caleb Downs, but you also had some younger guys or inexperienced guys. Then the group that transferred in, they have a combined 29 starts, so you gain some experience. In general, the defense saw a net gain in snaps, and the special teams saw a net gain as well. And you also get your left tackle back in Caden Proctor, so I know some people have Alabama outside their top 10. I have them at 5. This is really a bet on Jalen Milroe, his experience, and Kalen DeBoer. Kalen has won everywhere he's been. He's 104-12 as a head coach. Number 4, Texas. College football playoff berth last year. Quinn Ewers is back. They revamped the receiving room with some transfers. Most importantly, the offensive line should be solid. They return 83% of their offensive line snaps. Combine that with a returning starter at quarterback, and you got another contender in Austin, Texas. Still have a chance to prove themselves out of the gate because they go to Michigan week 2 on the road, early season test. And then they have back-to-back games in October against Oklahoma, Red River rivalry, followed up by a home game against Georgia. That's a big one. They closed the regular season against Texas A&M at Kyle Field, and I am so glad that we have that rivalry back. And you know that the Aggies are going to try to play spoiler with Texas' season or their seeding in the 12-team playoff, assuming they're in the picture. Number 3, Oregon. The Ducks are going to be a problem. They have a strong offensive line. They have vertical threats at receiver in Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson, and then plug in 6-year quarterback Dylan Gabriel, who has a ton of experience. He has nearly 15,000 passing yards in his collegiate career. So he's a plug-and-play guy. Defensively, they added 6 transfers on defense, including Washington corner Jabbar Muhammad. He was a really good physical corner last year for the Huskies. But the question is, can Dan Lanning win that big marquee game? He's a young head coach. I get that. It's only his 3rd year as a head coach. He hasn't beaten Washington. He's 0-3, including those 2 losses last year, both to Washington. And those 2 losses to the Huskies was by a combined 6 points. Now, the concern this year isn't really much about Washington as it is about Ohio State and Michigan, but you don't have to win every game. That's what we're going to learn and get used to with the 12-team playoff. You don't have to win every game, and their schedule, I don't think, is as difficult as the number 2 and number 1 ranked teams. Number 2, Ohio State. I hate the label of national championship or bust, but it kind of feels that way, and people are talking about it that way. This is the year for them to win it all. They have 6 returning starters on offense, but even more importantly, they have 9 starters returning on defense. That was one of the best defenses in the country last year, and now you're adding a transfer in Caleb Downs. Plug him in as a safety into that secondary, and immediately your defense gets an upgrade. Other notable transfers include Ole Miss running back Quinshon Judkins, over 2,700 rushing yards and 31 rushing touchdowns for Ole Miss the last 2 years, and he's a perfect complement to the returning running back Travion Henderson, who's more of a get him out in space and he'll make you miss type of guy. They upgraded at center. They got a new quarterback, Will Howard. They have dudes all over this roster. True freshman Jeremiah Smith is going to make himself well known to college football fans this year. They're very excited about that guy. They'll have plenty of tests in their schedule. They have 3 top 10 games according to my rankings: at Oregon, at Penn State, and home versus Michigan. The questions for Ohio State: offensive line and quarterback. Is it 10 to 15% better than last year? And if that answer is yes, then they are your national champs. Number 1, Georgia. So here's the deal. The Bulldogs are 42-2 in the last 3 seasons. Those only 2 losses, both coming to Nick Saban in Alabama, and Nick Saban is gone. I think Carson Beck is the best returning quarterback in college football. He leads returning FBS QBs with nearly 4,000 passing yards in 2023. The offense also gets a boost at running back with Florida transfer Trevor Etienne, who averaged nearly 6 yards per carry the last 2 years. Secondary will be stingy again, and they have All-American safety Malachi Starks. Now, their schedule comes with a few tests as well. They open with Clemson, neutral site game, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Then week 4 at Alabama, huge game, and I'm excited to see how both those quarterbacks will play in that game. Week 7 is at Texas, another big game, and then that's followed up with a road game at Ole Miss on November 9th, and then they get a home game versus Tennessee on November 16th. Ole Miss at that point will know whether or not that they've been living up to the hype, and then Tennessee will see how big of a step their new quarterback has taken, but Georgia has a 99% chance of making the playoff.